Hello. Good morning, Chief. Did I wake you? Yes, Paul, you did. Do you need me for something? What time is it? It's still dark out my window. It's 1 a.m., sir. We found a body on Natart Beach. A young couple, out walking, came across a man lying in the sand. Did you call the coroner? Yes, but when I was on the phone with him, the gentleman took in a big breath, so I called an ambulance and they carted him off to Lincoln City. Okay, so why are you calling me? I'm supposed to be up at 6 a.m. for a doctor's appointment in Portland. Can't you handle this on your own? You're in charge, right? Yes, sir. Ram, this is intriguing, and I expect you would be more interested in knowing what's going on now, rather than finding out when you get back. All right, what is it, Paul? What's so intriguing? Well, the victim was staying in a cabin on Natart Beach. The manager said the victim used the name, Jerry Reckless, which we've already concluded was an alias. He gave me the key to the man's rental cabin. John and I entered the cabin where we found a large backpack containing a lot of cash, over 160 grand. Upon further inspection, we found a thumb drive in the video player labeled St. Paul Corporation, so we checked it out. It's disturbing. You need to see this for yourself, in case we need to call in forensics from Portland. All right, I'm on my way. Paul, Ramous lead officer, and John, a local state sheriff, were waiting for the chief in front of the lobby at the small resort. They led him to the cabin where Daniels was staying and asked him to have a seat. Once he sat, Paul turned on the video player. Before coming to Tillamook, Ramous spent 12 years as a detective with the Portland Police Department. When the position of police chief came available on the coast, in the small town of Tillamook, he jumped on it. He grew up in Tillamook as his parents owned and operated a bed and breakfast on the beach in Garibaldi. Both of his parents died 6 years ago in an auto accident on Highway 101, and he inherited the hotel and another 2 acres in Manzanita. He left the bed and breakfast to sit empty until he moved back to become police chief at the Tillamook station. That was 5 years ago. His position as police chief covered all the communities from Astoria to Newport. Even with 45 experienced officers under his command, they always called him in when something big or unusual happened. This fell into the category of unusual. Ramous watched the whole disturbing video. I guess I'm not going to Portland. He's seen many deranged things while being a detective, and this fell into that category. Paul, did you say the ambulance took the man into Lincoln City? Did you find any identification on him? Yes. They took him to Lincoln City, but we found no ID on him. Okay. Don't call the F-team in Portland. Gather all the evidence and take it into the station. Put it in the vault. I'm going to Lincoln City. Ramous was too tired to drive to Lincoln City, but he needed to contact the victim to find out what happened. His gut feeling made him suspect it could have been a corporate or mob hit. Suspicious bodies have washed up on the beach in the past, all proving to be one form of a hit or another. The Salem and Portland police departments usually took over those investigations. He knew this because he was friends with most of the detectives in both cities. It was never a problem for Ramous to get information from either Portland or Salem for any investigation. He thought about his time as a Portland detective, but recalled nothing about the deaths of those doctors or anyone else concerning the St. Paul Corporation. He heard of St. Paul, but didn't pay much attention to what they did. Once at the hospital, he inquired about the man brought in from Natart's. Dr. Peterson came out to speak with him. Hello, doctor. Can you tell me the condition of the man from Natart's? He's still unconscious. Someone broke his neck, and they did it in such an unusual way. How so? There was only a small area of bruising around the break. I would expect a great deal of bruising around his whole neck. I'm not sure how, but someone committed it with such precision as to only separate the vertebra around the spinal cord, with no cuts or breaks in the cord itself. The small bruise on the back of the neck looked like someone hit him with just a finger. He was fortunate because they hit him off to the side of his spinal cord. Any harder or more centered, it would have killed him. He will be out for a while. Chief, I'm confident this was not an accident. Yes, that's what I was thinking too. Do you have an idea of how long he will be out? No clue. Even if he woke up, he probably won't be able to talk for a while or move. Also, we have a medevac coming. We need to fly him to Portland, where they can fix the injury. This hospital doesn't have the proper equipment to operate on him. Once we get him stabilized, we will send him into Portland. I'm sure he will survive. Thanks. Did you find any identification on him, or have you figured out who he is? Ramous' cell rang. It was Paul on the other end. What's up, Paul? John found the guy's car. It was registered to a Peter Daniels from Portland. I'll be back in the office in 10 to 15 minutes, and I'll continue to check on him. Good. He's still unconscious and they're flying him into Portland. Call me as soon as you get info on him. Yes, sir. Dr. Peterson waited for Ramous to finish the call. No, we didn't find his ID. We took a blood sample for DNA purposes. If you like, we can send those off to a lab for comparison to the national database. That won't be necessary. We found out who he is. His name is Peter Daniels. He's a Portland resident. You should check whatever medical records the state might have regarding him. That should help you treat him. When you check the medical records, do it in such a way as not to alert anyone. I don't want his real name out there because he's part of an investigation, and at this moment, I want no one to know he's still alive. Someone tried to kill him, and I suspect they might come back to finish the job. I assume he will go to OHSU in Portland. Please tell them to put him under an alias. I know they're familiar with the procedure in this kind of situation. Yes, I do have a secure method to access health records with no one hacking in, and all Oregon hospitals are up to date with using aliases. I need to get back to my patient. So, thank you, Chief, and good night. Good night, Doctor. On his way back to Tillamook, Ramous thought about the video and the man who was in a coma. It almost hurt to think about the 2 years he spent in a coma himself. 10 years ago, another driver fell asleep at the wheel, crossed the center line, and hit him head-on, just north of Olympia, Washington. He was on his way to visit his friends, Hank and Maggie, in Seattle. He ended up in a coma, and was placed in a convalescent home as a John Doe for 2 long years. The other driver, a young Canadian man, died at the scene. Thieves took both drivers' wallets, including cash and ID, while they lay unconscious on the road, and before he was found, a chop shop came by and stole both vehicles and left him and the other driver beside the road. The police didn't find them until the next morning. Their vehicles were never recovered. The hospital sent DNA samples to local and national databases for both drivers, but Ramous did not show up in the system. Neither did the young Canadian. The whole incident and the lost time still make Ramous mad. How could an act as simple as checking a person's DNA get so screwed up? It left his family and friends to wonder what happened to him for 2 years. That was the reason he planned to visit the doctor this afternoon. He didn't remember the whole 2 years, and the doctor was helping him recover his memories, as well as his physical injuries. Ramous hated being reminded of it. He struggled because of it and pushed it to the back of his mind. That was the only way he could deal with it. He spoke under his breath, I hope Daniels doesn't spend 2 years in a coma. Then he turned his attention back to the problem at hand and how bizarre the video seemed to be. Maybe it was part of a horror movie? However, it looked real. Again, Ramous did not recollect those murders while he worked for the Portland Police Department. They could have taken place while he was in a coma, but at some point, someone would have mentioned it. As far as Daniels is concerned and involved, he could only speculate what took place. Before too much longer, he predicted this was a case he would turn over to another department, and that would be the end for him, so why bother? He'd just keep notes and evidence and pass them along to the appropriate agents in Portland or Salem. Ramous was too tired and headed home instead of back to the office. He was sure Paul would call him with any pertinent information regarding their victim, but hoped he'd wait until late morning. With a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, he expected to go into Portland, But he would reschedule, although he thought he would go into Portland when Mr. Daniels became conscious. Ramous slept in until noon. He didn't want to sleep so late and expected Paul to call with information on Daniels before then, and that perturbed him. Even though he put Paul in charge, he expected Paul to keep him in the loop. Ramous called into the office and Claire answered. She was the day switchboard operator. "Good morning, Claire. Is Paul around?" "Good afternoon, Chief. Paul isn't here. We got a call 2 hours ago about a serious car accident on 101. I have not heard from him since he left. I've tried getting him on the radio, but he has not responded." It was the policy for every officer not to leave their vehicle without a portable. Paul understood the importance of the policy, and both Ramous and Claire thought it was unusual that he would act irresponsibly. Where was the accident? 101, near Pacific City. "Keep trying to get him on the radio. I'll drive over and find out what's up. I'll chew him out for not carrying his portable." "Yes, sir, I will." Ramous took a shower, got dressed, and drove to Pacific City, where he found no patrol cars on the highway. He made several passes, all the while calling Paul on the radio. No answer. He tried looking up Paul's vehicle location on his cell, but it did not show up on the GPS. He radioed back to the station. "Claire, have you heard from Paul yet?" "No, Chief, I have not." "You haven't seen him?" "No, and I've passed Pacific City twice and found nothing. He isn't answering my calls. I tried locating his vehicle on GPS, but it's not showing up. Can you pull his vehicle up on the GPS in the office?" "I've already tried that. He doesn't show up here either." "Hold on 1 second, I'll try again." After a minute, she replied. "He's not showing here either, Chief." Every patrol car, marked and unmarked, was equipped with the most advanced location system available. That was necessary because of the remote locations the officers patrolled. Something was wrong, and Ramous was painfully suspicious. During the time the two worked together, Paul has never broken protocol. Ramous' first concerns were about last night's events. He hoped the vehicle was having problems, and not Paul. Ramous drove into the station. Once there, he took a seat at Paul's desk to go through his computer. He wanted to find out if Paul uncovered information on Mr. Daniels. When he turned the screen on, it was blank and wouldn't respond. He turned it off and back on. Still, it presented only a blank screen. Knowing all the computers in the building were networked, he logged in as Paul at another workstation. As a matter of policy, the chief was given access to everyone's login and password. Once he logged in, he opened the history and found where Paul logged into a national search database with Peter Daniels' name attached to the end. He clicked on the address. It returned to the login. After he logged in again with Paul's information, a screen came up with several bits of information about Daniels. It included all the general information about where he lived, where he worked, his birth date, his family, etc. There was nothing special about Mr. Daniels. Then the screen went blank, and the computer refused to work afterward. Ramous was now dealing with a virus. Ramous found enough information on Daniels, so he didn't risk looking again. "Claire, have you found Paul yet?" "No, Chief. He has not responded, and I'm worried." "Me too. Okay, put out an all-points bulletin. Let's find him. Also, call the computer guy and get him over here. I believe we have a virus or worm in our system, and I suspect it's related to our man on the beach." Then, Ramous called into OSHU in Portland to find out the condition of Daniels. Daniels was still in surgery. There were no other updates. He chose the rest of the day to find his second-in-command. He and Paul became friends and spent time outside of work hanging out together. Ramous often invited Paul and other officers over to his home for BBQs. He and all the other local officers spent the whole day looking for Paul. They did not find him or his vehicle. There were miles of highway where a car could leave the road and remain hidden for years. The station purchased a GPS designed to work, even after an officer totaled the vehicle. That was the main reasons they installed the system in the patrol vehicles. Someone else disconnected it. Ramous didn't believe Paul would have done so. Ramous assumed all of this tied into Mr. Daniels and the St. Paul Corporation. Tomorrow, he would contact St. Paul after finding his officer first. On his way home, Ramous radioed the station and spoke with Sherry, the swing shift dispatcher, and asked her to keep him updated regarding Paul. Sherry, please call me every 2 hours and keep me up to date, and make sure everyone's looking for him. Will do, Chief. You will be the first person I call if we find him. Thanks. I'm going home for the night. You can contact me there. Yes, sir. When Ramous got home, he made himself a bowl of soup and a sandwich. Afterward, he retired to the sitting room with his dinner. He built a fire as he took a seat in his favorite oversized chair. Before he ate, he said a prayer. Lord, Paul is a good friend of mine. He's a fellow believer, and I'm confident your desires will be accomplished. I'm asking you to protect him in whatever situation he's in. I don't want to act like a pessimist, but I have a terrible feeling about this. Lord, above all, please let your will be done. I praise and love you, Lord. Thank you. Ramous quietly pushed himself back in his comfortable chair for several minutes, thinking about how the house often felt empty. Being it was a bed and breakfast, and larger than most homes on the coast, it was too big for just one person, but it was home. Recently, he sold all the hotel furniture his parents bought for the bed and breakfast, except for 3 rooms to use as guest rooms. Most of the other rooms remained empty, although he made plans to fill them back up again. Even before he moved back, he'd been thinking of reopening the place. Now, he wasn't spending as much time there as he would have liked to, causing him to believe it shouldn't be lifeless any longer. He grew up in the house and loved every scarce minute he was at home. Ramous was 39 years old. He stood 5'11" with a stocky build. He weighed just under 200 pounds, and like Daniels, he looked much younger than his age. Everyone commented when he told his age, saying how young he looked. He looked to be in his late 20s. He attended high school in Tillamook. Afterward, he attended college at the University of Pennsylvania, which had the best criminal justice program in America. He was always interested in the field. As a kid, he often conducted his own investigations around the neighborhood, which often got him into trouble with the local police, nearly killed twice. The police chief at the time recognized Ramous' enthusiasm and encouraged him to attend the university. Chief Charlie Williams was a devout Christian. He was the person who led Ramous to the Lord. They became friends, and when Charlie retired, he put in a good word for Ramous, which guaranteed him the position. Paul also grew up in the neighborhood. He was 5 years younger than Ramous. Ramous saw him around the neighborhood when he was a kid. He never hung out with him and only spoke to him twice before becoming police chief. While Ramous was in college, Paul joined the local police department and has been an officer since. While he was young, Williams led Paul to the Lord. Ramous understood whatever happened would be God's will. In life and death, God's will would always be perfect no matter how much it hurt, and Ramous was hurting for his friend Paul. Ramous felt guilty for thinking of the hotel when his attention should have been on finding his friend. He spent the next 2 days looking along the highway for any sign indicating a vehicle might have gone off the road. He took many back roads, hoping to find Paul's patrol car. Meanwhile, he kept calling into Portland, checking on the condition of Daniels. Daniels made it through the surgery, but was still comatose in the IC unit. As Ramous was sitting at his desk researching the St. Paul Corporation, he received a phone call from his ex-wife. "Hi Ram. How are you?" "I'm fine, Janet. What about you?" "I'm okay. What I called you about was a visit I had 10 minutes ago. 2 suits showed up at the door asking about you and your affiliation with the St. Paul Corporation. I knew nothing about your affiliation with St. Paul and told them so. They kept pressing me to answer questions I didn't have answers to. Afterward, they became rather rude. I closed the door in their faces. What's going on?" "It's an investigation I'm working on. There's nothing to worry about. Next time tell them we're divorced, and I live here in Tillamook. Tell them I don't discuss my work with you and they should contact me." I told them that, but they kept pressing. They asked if I heard anything about the St. Paul Corporation. I told them no, I hadn't. They were disrespectful and made me nervous. All right, I plan on talking with someone from St. Paul today. I'll ask them not to bother you again. Okay, thanks, Ram. Now, how are you doing? I miss you. Is there any chance you will be in Portland anytime soon? I plan to be in town tomorrow and throughout the next week, concerning this investigation. Would you like to stop by? No, we've talked about this before, January. I like it the way it is now. You on your side of the fence, me on mine. Are you ever going to forgive me? We've talked about this before too. I forgave you a long time ago, as per the Bible. That doesn't mean we should get back together. I fought for this relationship until you moved in with Johnson. Because you did, I was free to leave. Now, as far as we go, I am concerned about your salvation, just as I would anyone else. You need to reconcile with God, not me. Thanks for calling and telling me about the suits. I'll make sure they don't bother you again. Have a good day. Goodbye. Goodbye, Ram. I'm sorry. Now, Ramous worried others might get involved. He couldn't understand why they contacted his ex-wife, Janet. He and she met in college. She was working towards a special education teaching degree. They met his freshman year and married right out of college. They were married for 5 years when she got involved in an affair with another teacher in the district she worked for. A year later, they divorced. 5 years later, 2 years after his accident, Ramous took the police chief position with Tillamook and moved back to the coast. Janet stayed behind with her new husband in Portland, until that relationship crashed, and she has been after Ramous ever since, telling him it was all a big mistake. He wasn't having any of it. Ramous called all the local phone numbers for the St. Paul Corporation with no luck. He'd been trying to get hold of someone in the corporation for several days. Finally, he gave up, walked out to Claire's desk, and asked, "Could you please contact St. Paul and find out if there are any phone numbers that can get me in contact with upper management? I'm not having any luck. Thanks." "Yes, Chief." For some reason, the suits in Portland and Salem didn't think this was mob-related. It was now his responsibility, and he was falling behind on the investigation. He was more worried about Paul missing than anything else. A few minutes later, Claire received a call from the state troopers. "Ramous." "Yes?" "The state troopers called. They are putting out an APB because John is now missing." Ramous stood silent for a moment. "Not John too. I hope he's okay. God, please protect him. Okay, let our officers know." Concerned, he took another trip along 101. 5 miles up the highway, Ramous pulled off on a side road leading to John's house. Once there, he met 2 state troopers who worked with John. Officer Sandale met him in the driveway. "Hi Chief Rignor, how are you?" "Not so good for the past few days since Paul went missing." "Yeah, we have been looking for him for 2 days too, and now John is missing. Sheriff Parks didn't show for his shift this morning, and John has never missed a shift without notice or good reason. His patrol vehicle and his personal vehicle are both in the garage, so John is around here somewhere. I'm sure he is. Right now, we have 2 patrol officers combing the beach as we speak, in case he took a walk and something happened where he couldn't make it back home. They left over 2 hours ago. Let me contact them and find out where they are." Sandale radioed the officers on the beach. "Hey guys. Did you find Sheriff Parks?" "Nope, we have found nothing so far. We're headed back now and expect to be at his house in half an hour." "Thanks." He put his radio back onto his vest. "What do you think, Chief? Do you suspect foul play? He would never disappear on his own accord." Before Ramous could answer, a voice came across Sandale's radio. "We found him, and it's bad." "Where are you guys?" "We're a quarter mile south of you. Jerry, we sent for the coroner." Both Jerry's and Ramous' expressions turned downward, being dumbfounded by the news regarding John. Ramous and Sandale drove along the beach where the other officers were waiting. Upon approaching the officers and informed them, they found John lying under a pile of grass and seaweed. They touched nothing, but could tell John's neck was broken by the position of his head to his body. One officer told Jerry and Ramous they called the coroner and asked if they should call in forensics. Ramous answered, "Yes, but let me call them. We can't leave him here all day." Ramous pulled his cell phone out and called into Portland. "Hello, this is Police Chief Rignor from Tillamook. We have a deceased officer just south of Pacific City. You need to send a forensics team, immediately. We can have a team drive down. They should be there in 3 hours." "Officer, let me speak to the Director of Forensics." "Hello, this is Bill Saylor, Head of Forensics. What can I do for you, Chief Rignor?" "I want a forensics team down here south of Pacific City within the hour. We have a deceased officer, and I do not want to leave him on the beach all day waiting for a team to drive here. There will be no argument, period." "No problem, Chief. We have a chopper on the pad and I'll send a team now. They should be there within an hour and a half. We can't fly any faster." "Okay, thank you. I'm forwarding GPS coordinates as we speak." "Thanks for the coordinates. I have them. Now, let me get on your request, Chief. Please call me back should there be any problems." "I will, and thank you." Ramous looked down at John, which made him ill. He looked over at Jerry, whose eyes were tearing up. Again, Ramous assumed all of this was tied to the man Daniels and the St. Paul Corporation. He was so busy looking for Paul, it left no time for the real investigating. Now, he was mad that he was getting no help from Portland or Salem, and other than a few inquiries into Daniel's condition, and trying to find phone numbers for St. Paul management, Ramous has accomplished nothing. The forensic team showed up, took several pictures, and combed the area around John's body. Once they finished, David Burns, the local coroner, could examine the body. He determined his neck was broken and was the cause of death. He also said they dumped John in the place where he lay. Bruises around John's body showed they carried him to the spot after he was deceased. David said, the person who put him here was above average strength. To carry his 200-plus-pound lifeless body would have taken an extraordinary amount of strength, and by the bruises around the body, it was a single individual who carried him. There's no sign he was placed in the back of a vehicle, so that person had to carry him to this location. Also, whoever broke his neck used a considerable amount of force. John did not resist, and he died quickly, because there were no defensive wounds on his hands or arms. I hate coming to a crime scene like this one. John was my friend. He was a good man and officer. I'll give you more information once I get him into the lab. Then David turned to Jerry. I'm so sorry. I know you two were good friends, and I'll call you and the chief when I have completed the autopsy. David left with John in the back of his van. It was a sad moment for the state patrol officers and Ramous. He just wanted to go home and pretend none of this happened. He expected he was in for another moment of dire sadness when they find Paul. He prayed, Lord, please help me understand all of this. I need strength to get through this. Thank you. Ramous drove back to John's house where they determined that someone forced the back door open, but nothing else appeared out of order. He assumed the person murdered John at home and carried him to the spot where they found him. He figured the way they covered him with grass and seaweed, they didn't want him found right away. Ramous was having a hard time thinking this through, because Paul was still missing, and now he was emotionally torn and feeling ineffective.